me a headache.
Yeah, tell me about it. Us took the hackers months to figure out how to do this.
The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. They have created a repressive society, and we are their unwitting accomplices. Please understand, they are safe as long as they are not discovered. That is their primary method of survival. To keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
Welcome to another Boer Republic Podcast. Tonight we've got a special South African guest joining us, SGL. He's recently got a YouTube channel, but he is no stranger to speaking about South Africa to an international audience and especially on an international stage. Welcome to the show, SGL. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me. It's quite an honor to be on your show. As I've expressed in the past, I respect you immensely. You're doing great work, and yeah, keep on keeping on.
Thank you for the kind words. It's appreciated.
No worries. Thank you for helping to get the message out there, to sort of destroy the media narrative. As I commented on your one video, I really appreciated that documentary you made about the Afrikaner squatter camp in Bloemfontein. It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? People tend to think white privilege is this all-encompassing thing. Every white man is privileged in the country, when that's simply not the case, demonstrably not the case.
Thank you, first of all, for the kind words. That's one of the reasons why we did it, was to show that despite the issues we face in the country, there are those that slip through the cracks. There are others that society forgets, and also that white privilege isn't exactly what it is made out to be. So thank you for those kind words. One of the reasons, well, there are many reasons why we have you on the show this evening, but if you could give the audience a bit of background information on who you are, what you stand for, and where you're coming from, especially regarding the South African question.
Certainly. Well, I'm South African, obviously, and Afrikaner. I know my English accent might not sound like that, but I am definitely Afrikaans. I stand for my people, our people. I think we have been given a very rough deal, especially in the last 20 years or so. It's been accelerating to a point where we are now, where we are under threat of not only having our property stolen from us, but potentially being killed. Being wiped out as an entire race, as a culture. It's absurd to think. So I stand for my people, the continued prosperity of my people. And yeah, in terms of political ideologies, I suppose conservative, paleo-libertarian perhaps, a bit of, shall we say, Hans Herman Hoppe outlook on what a nation should be.
So yeah, I think that was a very nice, succinct summary, and I think that is the second time we've heard the word paleo-libertarian podcast. So we'll get to that, and you can expand on that.
Yes, certainly.
No, just the initial question. I mean, we fully agree with that statement that people really look in the mirror seriously and realize that it is basically a genocidal attempt on our people. What was your turning point? What was that one situation, that one step too far, that one event that made you just, stop in your tracks, think that, okay, this can't go on. I have to get down, I have to do something. I have to get the word out there. I have to take action. Could you take us maybe through that, if anything comes to mind?
Sure thing. Let me preface that by saying it's been a long time coming. I'm sure most of us who are at least somewhat politically aware have always felt things aren't right. There's always this looming threat. We aren't in control of our government. We aren't in control of our destiny, so to speak. We are at the behest of people who are openly hostile against us. But the biggest turning point, I'd say, was when the talks of land expropriation actually started materializing further than just talks, if that makes sense. Initially, I was fairly hopeful. I heard the talks of expropriation without compensation. I just thought, that's a political ploy. They just want votes for next year's election. And that is true. They do want that. But I thought that the government would leave it at that. Just talk, as they usually do with these kinds of things. But the fact that they've gone so far as to actually start reviewing a potential amendment of the Constitution, that really scares me. And that really red-pilled me as well, because then I truly realized we're up against we're up against these people who hate us, and they actively want to see us dead. Basically, it's crazy to think, but that's what red pilled me.
The one thing we know about the South African government, and generally when they come forth with some kind of governmental program, you know that it's kind of been in the planning a couple of years, and they're basically not telling us. And I think the only one that just comes to me now that we've actually been able to stop is probably e-tolls. It's the one thing that they try to push upon the population.
Yeah.
But, as a percentage, it's so small against all the other government programs, BE, you name it. We were basically just softened up for a while, and then it was brought in. And you're right, it is very late in waking up, but better late than never.
Yeah, I mean, it's a classic. I believe. I'm not sure if it's verified necessarily, but I know there's this quote floating around that Cyril Ramaphosa back in the day said that the ANC policy of treating white people will be the frogs in a pot scenario, where you slowly heat up the pot until the frog starts boiling, but he doesn't jump out because he doesn't realize that the pot is being heated up. And I think it's exactly what's happened with us. I mean, when we talk about genocide, for example, earlier I mentioned that. What a lot of people tend to forget, I think, is, or people tend to view genocide as this sort of black and white issue. They think genocide is only troops being put on the ground shooting people. Now, obviously, farm murders are a thing. I'm not downplaying that at all, and it's horrific. But I think that the true genocide is the cultural genocide that we're experiencing. Just recently at my university campus, the public protector was there giving a speech, and EFF members showed up to the speech, and constantly their question was, what are we going to do with the language? Shall we keep Afrikaans as a potential teaching language? Their response was, no, it's racist. We can't allow that. So that's what I'm getting at. The cultural genocide, I think, is much further reaching because it affects everyone. Obviously, the farm murders do as well. Don't get me wrong. I detest them. They're fucking disgusting. But they're more localized within rural communities, if that makes sense. The destruction of a culture, our sports institutions, etc., schools, for example, it demoralizes us as a people. It makes us feel like second-class citizens. Weakens us for the eventual, when guns are on the street, so to speak, when the boots are on the ground, then we won't fight back because what are we fighting for? You understand? Yeah,
the culture aspect is actually quite a very far-reaching issue. You mentioned previously we did the mini documentary on the squatter camp in Bloemfontein. And whilst we were traveling through the Free State, one of our listeners informed us that there was this issue with the University of the Free State. The statue of President M.T. Steyn that sits there on the university campus was deemed as a vestige of colonialism. It was a symbol of a racist past. So now what's happened is there's this huge issue where the statue is under review. It might be removed. It might not be removed. But the university has taken a seemingly sensible option by having the community give feedback, by having the community respond and write into the university to say why it should be removed or why it shouldn't be removed. And part of and it's something we're going to be doing a video on soon, is just to bring it on that topic, is how our culture deteriorates. At the same time, whilst people were arguing about this statue that has to be removed, we found out that Afrikaans books were being thrown out of the university campus library, for instance. And this is a university in the middle of the Orange Free State, which used to be a Boer Republic. It was essentially as Afrikaans as you can get in South Africa. So there's a specific attack on our culture. There's a specific attack on what we stand for as a people. And once you have our art, once you have our written word, our memory, our history, once you start wiping that out, then most assuredly we'll start losing our identity.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing that I don't really want to get into the topic necessarily, but when we talk about, say, racial consciousness or what is a nation, what is a people, there's so many factors, so many esoteric factors, culture factor in what makes a people unique. And if we don't have that, then, what are we? Talking about on the topic of the statue, a few years ago, the statue of Tertius was also removed from the Potchefstroom Camp WU. It was removed by the family of Tertius because they knew they were fearing that the statue would be vandalized. And just a little bit of an anecdotal story. I actually experienced that. I saw images of people, of black individuals, vandalizing the statue before it was removed. They would climb onto the statue and pretend hold their hands as if they were shooting at Tertius's head and take photos of that, because that's very funny after all. Killing the culture, killing the white man. Yeah. Very funny indeed. So it's a constant thing, and it disgusts me because to the normie, to the person who's maybe not too into politics, maybe a person who might consider themselves liberal because that's basically cool. They might hear University of the Free State is no longer Afrikaans, and they might think, oh, that's fine. That's fine because we have to uplift the poor black people. They can't speak Afrikaans, blah, blah, blah. But that's what makes it so insidious, is because to the untrained ear, all of these actions are framed as some form of economic or social justice. To the untrained ears, they might hear these things and think, wow, aren't we living in a progressive country? They just want to fix everything. When in reality, that's completely the opposite of what's happening.
Yeah, but that is a play upon the white guilt that they have been brewing. Well, they have been brewing on us. It's probably part of our genetic makeup in a sense that we probably are more, I want to say, compassionate, but more doubting of ourselves, which obviously gives that we advance more because we doubt, so we question, and we have better technology, but also that people can exploit us. They can exploit that aspect of not just obviously us, I think in a genetic way, but of our culture as well, because as Christianity is a big part of Afrikaner culture, and with Christianity is the idea of always questioning yourself in a certain extent, and that is being exploited, and it is something that has been brewing for maybe a generation or two, especially I think our parents, as they kind of grew up at the time nearing apartheid, they kind of started the whole idea of white guilt, and it was propagated within us, and now it's come full circle, and now it's actually so easy now. It is so easy for them to just throw accusations, and we just cough up resources because we don't know anything else. We were never taught to fight for the little things. They're like, absolutely not. When we're gonna talk our language in our house, we're gonna be taught in our language. We're gonna talk our language in the shops and the restaurants, and that's it. If you don't want that, then go build your own Zulu University, build your own Xhosa University. It's fine, do it, and we will build our own. And
absolutely,
we're not standing up for the little thing. But now, when it comes to the actual biggest turning point there is, where basically it's now your property rights are now under threat, meaning, which is basically saying your ability to self-determine is now completely under threat. And now it's so late to wake up. But it's almost, you can say it's, we talk about genocide, and again, it's probably a word that's loosely defined and difficult to really pinpoint objectively, but you could almost see basically what they've done, and I'm talking now about the communist elites, over the last few generations. Sure. What they've done is extremely smart. They have basically drained us from all our resources. I'm sure all three of us here have worked ourselves to the bone. Most of our taxes has gone to black people and their children, not to white. And that's why we did the documentary about this white squatter camps. At least, hopefully, my money can go to them. If I have to pay these exorbitant taxes, hopefully at least it can go to a single mom with 3 kids who are white. But statistically, no, I'm literally paying for my own destruction. And in a sense, that is a genocide of, first, it's a sense of slavery, and then we'll just take the last bit.
It is, absolutely. Absolutely. You touched upon a very important point when you said that people, if they want to, they should be able, they should get their own Zulu or Xhosa university, whatever. I agree with that fully. If there's a demand in the market for a Zulu university, I think that a Zulu university should be created. I have no issue with that. That's fine. That's a form of self-determination. If you as a Zulu individual feel you want a Zulu university, go for it, fund it, create it. Awesome. But don't take my university that teaches in my language. Why take that away from me? Why not create? Why break down? That's what that always bothers me, because of course we don't live in a free market system. Obviously, we do still have some market principles that apply. And of course, the principle of if there's a demand, there will be a supply. I think it still exists in our system by and large. I mean, if you look at the private security sector in our country, they're doing much better than the police services. And so too can a university, in my opinion. I'm pro any group of people who want to self-govern and self-improve. So I'm also fine with the idea of, let's say the Zulu King wants to label a portion of KwaZulu-Natal as an autonomous region. Let him do that, as long as we are allowed to do that as well.
That's the interesting thing, though. Mentioning the Zulu self-determination, for instance. We've recently had in the news where King Zwelithini blatantly stated that if Ramaphosa wants to take Zulu land, he's going to have to fight for it. You know, he's going to have to come and take it off the cold, dead hands of the Zulu King before he expropriates his land. And the ultimate double standard presented itself where Ramaphosa made all the effort to fly out to King Zwelithini and to tell him, no, dude, it's all fine. It's fine. Chill, bro. It's not you. It's not your land we want. It's those guys over there. Just chill. You're fine. You're safe. And then Zwelithini was like, okay, cool, bro. It's fine. Great. And then what makes it even worse is Ramaphosa most likely used taxpayer money to fly all the way to Zwelithini and tell him, you are not under threat. Everything is fine. Relax. So why doesn't Ramaphosa fly out to us and reassure us that, you know, our stuff is safe? That presents the double standard, and it clearly gets the situation behind whether it's fortunate or unfortunate. The ANC is playing along identity lines. You know, there's a clear statement of our people. We must do what is right for our people. And you mentioned earlier, you know, whether or not the ANC is doing this rhetoric just for voters. What eventually happens is that sort of that identitarian rhetoric in South Africa works. And that's how they get their voters.
So I think the problem with that as well is they might not have initially wanted, let's say hypothetically, and this is just a hypothesis and it's probably far from the truth, but let's say for the sake of the argument, the ANC was solely using this as a tactic to gain voters. They had no intention of actually going through with land expropriation. They create a monster by doing that, by appeasing these people, by telling them what they want to hear, their voter base. They create a monster. They set a precedent. 2 years ago, if you were to tell the average or ask the average black ANC voter, listen, do you want a piece of land? I don't think they would have said, yes, I'd like a piece of land, but I don't think they would have even thought of this concept, if you know what I mean. It's sort of like an inception of an idea implanted in their heads that didn't previously exist. But thanks to the ANC, now it exists, and now it will never not exist in their head. They've planted it in, and it's germinated and set up roots in the collective body politic of these people. So it's going to make our job a hell of a lot more difficult in future, because even if the ANC doesn't go through with the EWC, people will still want it. So every future political party that gets in power, let's say it's a DA or whatever, they will be facing a similar issue. They will always have the question. They will always be asked the question, Okay, well, what about the land? How will we address the quote-unquote land issue? So the ANC, I think, is much more dangerous, and that's usually the problem. Their stupidity makes them far more dangerous, in my opinion, because a competent government would have left this until the very end. They would have waited until just before next year's election and then said, oh, if you elect us, we'll go through with this plan. But they didn't. But yeah, and not that I'm saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying the ANC is incredibly incompetent. They don't realize what they do. Effects their actions have.
So they hypothetically blew their load a bit too early.
Well, conceptually, I think so. Not that I'm saying they should have ever done it in the first place. I'm just saying that they've created this monster that will not leave them or anyone. This country is basically kind of the body politic under the lower class voters has been so radically changed. I think that we're pretty much fucked in future. Sorry to use that rude word, but it's true. It's like in the apartheid era. Again, the ANC did this as well. They used terror to convince blacks to vote for them. They set this precedent of communistic, socialistic ideals. And that's why most of the parties in some way or even the DA, which claims to be classical liberal, they're more leftist. So that's the difficulty with people in places of power saying, especially if they're incompetent and unintelligent, as these ANC communist elites, as you correctly said, are. They don't realize the magnitude of their words. They don't realize how they're destroying the country, because obviously, by and large, this is a racial issue. Don't get me wrong, and I think the core, shall we say, core reasoning behind this EWC rhetoric is obviously race-based. But nonetheless, I think some of the more intelligent ANC members do realize that they do need whites to continue benefiting themselves. It's just that because of their party's stupidity, they'll end up wiping us out and end up starving to death themselves, all because they wanted votes. I mean, isn't that fucking absurd to think?
There's one thing which is quite astounding and quite naive amongst most people is the thought that we think the ANC is going to do anything other than the same communistic ideas that has been pushed in all other communistic countries that have failed, like Zimbabwe and Venezuela, because the whole elite of the ANC have been trained in communistic ideas for decades, absolute decades. And what we find now is we find the top of the ANC who's been trained by whoever for literally 50 years in these dictatorial communistic tactics. It's ludicrous to think that anything else is going to happen. And I agree with what you say, but I want to kind of push another angle here in that I think this is all completely expected. You know, we can look at other countries and they follow kind of the same game plan where it does at some point come, you know, we're going to try to take your jobs, then we're going to try to take your land, and then afterwards we just clean out the bank accounts. And there's the one thing where I think we've got an advantage, and you're right, obviously the government is incredibly incompetent. And I think that's something we have to jump on, because there's one issue for me, and it's the fact that we are still using these words like we talk as if we have to ask permission. We talk as if they are on our side. We talk as if there's any fairness whatsoever. It's so difficult, I think, to people that you have to understand, you have to do everything in your capabilities right now. You don't have to ask permission. You just have to do, because there is the law is not being abided by. Whatever law, and just say you take the Constitution, it's not being abided by. It will not be abided by until you and your nation is basically wiped out. So in that sense, I want to kind of like, you know, we shouldn't even be talking about permission. We should just be saying, all right, how are we going to self-determine? How are we going to set up? How are we going to fight back? Because we have to forget about them. And the great thing is that they're incompetent is the fact that we actually have a chance then. I was just watching a documentary about the west side of China. It's a very important part that China only took over decades ago, and it's part of their trade routes. And it is absolutely incredible, the police state those people people are under. Literally for you to go to a shop, you'll probably have your ID checked 4 or 5 times. To buy a knife, which is probably the same in London at the moment, you need to use your ID. They have put police stations on almost every third corner, like next to every Portuguese shop. So the government there is so efficient in creating a complete surveillance police state where we are literally the last of a genetic breed who can still actually live in a relatively free monarchistic society where we can still create exceptional wealth and technology. But communism will obviously destroy all of this. And that's why I push it. I say, like, we have an opportunity. If we all go and we all flee and we end up in America, we can also become a police state maybe, and London, which, you can't say anything and you can't even buy a knife. It's going to be an Islamic country. And I don't know where I'd rather be, here or under Islam. It's a tough choice. So, I think our time really is now to jump, because the police force is pathetic. It's just so pathetic. It's not that difficult.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
To bring it down. It's not.
You're right, though. It's crazy to think in the situation we are right now, we have something to be thankful for. We could have lived in China, in a country where the government is actually competent. Then we would have been completely screwed. But at least, like you said, we have a chance now. I think the best solution for our people is, like you said, don't ask questions, don't ask permission, just do. And I think the way we should go forward is through concepts like Urania. We can expand that until we gain the economic influence and political influence to just secede. We don't even have to ask questions, don't even have to ask permission. We just tell them, listen, we have an X amount of people living here, a few thousand. This is the amount of revenue we generate. Goodbye. We're our own country now. And I think that's our best bet, because I know what you mean about the police. Like, they won't necessarily fight back, but I'm always scared when I'm always fearful rather when treading on the topic of civil wars, because it's such a random variable. We don't know what could happen, because obviously the army itself isn't what it used to be. It's not competent anymore necessarily, but at the same time, I don't want our people to die as martyrs, or die in vain rather, because that won't be productive either. We should try and find a solution that leads to the least amount of bloodshed, in my opinion. But that's just my take. What do you think? What do you guys think?
No, obviously we agree with you 100%. The idea of this is to try and promote ideas which results in the absolute least amount of bloodshed either side. Obviously, preparedness is one of the first tenets that we believe in, and we have to be. Again, I think the first part, and what things are generally first a trade war, and then troops cross the borders. And we could see with USA and a lot of trade wars, all these things about like imports of, electric cars and plastics and recyclables. It's all just trade wars, and basically a lot of people losing their jobs in that. If you say to basically, all big white business owners say, what, just make sure your money stays within a pool of white people, employ white people, do business with other white businesses, try and incorporate like this. It's so beautiful what Urania is doing. They are creating their own currency. Of course you should do that. Use Bitcoin, use Litecoin, use whatever. Trading with your friends and trade that way, that when in everything else, because in a sense, it's true. You don't have to take on the police. You don't have to take on SARS. You don't have to take on the ANC elite. If they don't have money, which means they don't have your money, they can't do anything. If you are able, which the technology exists, to use your money in a way that, one, it can't be stolen, and that you have control over it, and that you invest it in the people you want to invest it in. That's the beauty of Urania. Once a rand goes into Urania,
absolutely,
it stays in there, because you can't take Aura out there and go to Bloom and go watch a movie. You can't. It is that idea, but you can still take that idea and take it in a more decentralized way, say within Cape Town in the larger area. If all I do, and again, we are smart. We do create a lot of businesses And, today you don't have to set up a factory shop. You can do so much from your own. You can create so much, and you can then trade across a large area in a way that you are not taxed. And if you're not taxed, it doesn't go to socialized programs, which one results in an obviously huge amount of single mothers, all with 5 or 6 children, which you pay for. It doesn't go into the socialized medical programs, which basically fix up gangsters and murderers every day. It doesn't go into jails where basically our murderers are kept alive. So that is the thing.
Exactly.
Time you give your money to SARS, you are paying for your own destruction, and people have to see that.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that since you mentioned tax rates. I think I've actually thought about this quite a lot. If if Urania were to expand and be able to affix its own, shall we say, central bank with its own tax regulations, if it could manage to, which isn't difficult, but if it were to set its tax rates at lower than South Africa's tax rates, I can only imagine Urania will achieve a golden age. They'll expand exponentially because our tax rates are just fundamentally too high, firstly. And secondly, as you said, they fund they fund programs that don't benefit us. In fact, by and large, they don't benefit the country either. They don't benefit anyone, if we were to look at the broad aggregate. So I think that would be a very smart idea of any, shall we say, independent region managed by our people, if they were just to cut taxes, because that would already, like I said, bring in a lot of investment. And then on the topic of Bitcoins and whatnot, have you heard of Cody Wilson?
Yes, the 3D gun
Of
designer.
course. Cody Wilson, he's a hero for me in a sense. For those who basically wants to kind of create a defense force that sells to the public. So basically creates a platform where you can buy files where you can print guns on a 3D printer. And he obviously tries to make it as safe as possible and as easy as possible. And in a sense, it is making it as easy as humanly possible to arm the public, not just to, protect themselves against petty crime, but protecting themselves against the greatest, force there is, and that is the government.
I agree wholeheartedly. I absolutely love the idea of things like that, where the power is given to you as the individual, because the systems have failed us. Our government has obviously failed us. So what recourse do we have? Well, simple. We look to ourselves. We look to our own people, and we seek solutions that way. And I think 3D printing guns might be a very viable solution. Cryptocurrency, of course, is huge, and I think a game changer as well. Speaking of which, I wonder if Urania is ever going to create its own cryptocurrency, because as far as I know, they're already using Bitcoins.
Yeah, well, we I don't know how much we're allowed to say about that, but
fair enough.
But we don't. Yeah, let's just say there's a few ideas that they have, which is obviously quite genius. All I can say is they're using all technology available.
Yeah,
create probably a better currency than you can have on the African continent.
Well, that's wonderful. I mean, that I wanted to say I can understand why there's secrecy around it, because that's why Urania is successful. They keep to their own. Let's put it that way, and that's their success. I think a big reason why we're in the situation we are today is because the idea of community has, by and large, been deteriorated across the world, but here as well. I mean, back in the day, it would be every Sunday, everyone would go to church, meet up with all your friends at church, discuss things. Church was basically obviously the religious component was there, but also it presented a platform for networking and strengthening the bonds of a community. And that's why back then trust was higher, because you could trust your neighbor. You could talk to your neighbor about your problems, etc., etc. Everyone had each other's back, so to speak. Now we live in this atomized society. Everyone is a hyper individualistic consumer. We just look out for ourselves. And I I think that's why I mentioned earlier, to the person who's not involved in politics, many of these actions by our government could be spinned as being appealing. And it could only work that way if a large portion of your nation doesn't care about politics. And the only reason why people aren't familiar with what's going on is because communities aren't as strong as they used to be. For example, you just sit at home, watch TV, watch US films, US TV series. You don't care about what's going on in the country. And I think that's by and large why we're in this position.
At least for us, one of the reasons why we did this is so that we can reestablish a sense of community amongst our own people. And by essentially trying to move into a full spectrum dominance of what could be essentially described as our culture by doing podcasts, doing videos and that, the idea is then to spread information. What would essentially be is to rekindle a sense of what we lost. You mentioned, a community like Orania has high social capital, social trust, there's cohesion. Us here at Boer Republic, we grew up in a time just before apartheid ended. And we were lucky enough to grow up in a community, in neighborhoods, in areas that have pretty much had a high social capital, social cohesion. So you had that sense, and we know what it was, and we know what we lost. So, that then it brings to mind, like, how do you rekindle that? And when we went to Orania, when we went and spoke to President Karl Boshoff, and we, in an effort to understand what they were trying to achieve, you soon realize that if you have a community that stands together, a community that is essentially has control over their production, control over their labor force, and a control over their economy, then you actually realize how the rest of the facets fall into place, especially social cohesion and social capital, especially that.
The other thing you experience in Orania, which we don't see in today's society, is, I should say, the use of ostracism still works extremely well because it's a tight-knit community. Everyone knows each other. There is a sense of dependence on each other. And Absolutely. The more that you have that tool, the less you need these ridiculous sort of government programs. Because at the moment, all we have is we have the ability to complain, to toy, to make a protest, to write a useless letter or something on Twitter, where in a small community, you are sort of a lot more responsible to kind of stay in your place, do your job and look after your neighbor, in a sense, because ostracism still means a lot. It really actually means that you can be extradited out of the community. You won't be able to survive. And in a sense, there is a limit to how big a community can get before generally a government will start taking over and then create atomized individuals. And obviously we are way past that many years and decades ago. So again, the idea of Orania is of creating these small communities. And just another thought on what we are doing. And if you look at sort of what alternative media in South Africa is doing, everyone is kind of playing a role. Some people are trying to fight the mainstream media. Some people are trying to attract overseas media and trying to attract overseas attention. And all of that is great and wonderful. Everyone plays their part. A big part we feel from our side is you actually try and create a community amongst the people that just are trying to find the tribe so that we can come together and that we can make actual, actionable, practical plans. Because it is our view, in a sense, that if we go and have fights on ENCA, all these stupid mainstream media, so it's not that we'll ever get there, but it's useless. It's basically useless. It is, and I'm not saying what Aaron Struts does is useless. Obviously, it's amazing what he does, and we support him wholeheartedly. But in the end, it's a losing battle. You aren't going to win playing by their rules. It is maybe a delaying tactic, but you're not going to win. 100% not. That's how we feel.
Absolutely. You took the words right out of my mouth. I'll be frank. I don't necessarily like Islam as a religion, but if we were to be objective and critical, if we were to look at their societies, Muslim societies. Now, again, I don't like Sharia law personally, but within Sharia law, shame is a big factor. It's a very big part of it. Ostracism, community recourse is a big thing. And that's why you don't necessarily see the same degeneracy in the Middle East as you do in the West necessarily. And now I'm not advocating Sharia or white Sharia or anything like that. I'm just saying community, a distinctly Afrikaner, Protestant, Calvinist equivalent of community-based, shall we say, social interaction. I think it's beneficial. It's beneficial to anyone who's involved. To get back to the topic, the thing is, I don't like government regulations necessarily because they can be very useful if your government looks after you. But the chances of that happening is very rare unless your people are homogenous, which would obviously make sense in a country, in a place like Urania, because the culture and the ethnicity of the people are homogenous. But generally speaking, I'll be frank, I'm very fearful and distrustful of the government, of any government really, because I don't think necessarily most governments have the best interests of their citizens in mind. Even ours, when they claim they want to expropriate the land to benefit the black underclass. The reality of the matter is, and this might be a bit conspiratorial, if you look at farms that have already been identified for expropriation, and you line them up with a map showing the mineral deposits in our country, they align almost 100% perfectly, which sort of gets you thinking. I don't think if the government were to expropriate these farmlands, they're not going to give them to black farmers. They're going to keep them for themselves. They're going to keep them for themselves and then sell the mineral rights to foreign multinational mining conglomerates.
We enjoy a good tinfoil hat chat. So where the conspiratorial angle comes in, I think that is a very important point to make. And you don't often find it reported in the news to say, because first of all, there was this issue about the lands, the farms that were targeted. Then it came out in the media that, it's a far right conspiracy. And then, AfriForum is leaking this and AfriForum is, race baiting and trying to undermine the government, and all manner of excuses came out in defense of the ANC. Not soon after, the first few farms that were targeted that were supposedly in the process of being expropriated or obtained were the first two on that list. So the question then comes is, what are their plans really? And like you mentioned, there's the issue with the fact that it overlaps with mineral interests or mining interests. Now, what doesn't get reported in the news as often is the fact that we have what is essentially a looming threat of Chinese interests in South Africa. Throughout the African continent itself, there is a huge interest in obtaining land and mining rights and industrial strength for China that gets sent back to China from Africa. And that is supposedly not a colonial issue or, raping the land or anything like that. They're allowed to do it. But, us whites are targeted for that specifically. Now, when you look at what's happening in South Africa, we've come across this concept or this idea that how true it is often debatable, but anything is possible in South Africa. And this is where the tinfoil hat, really starts to get thick is what do, for instance, and not to sound too much like Alex Jones regarding the Chinese communists, but, what it amounts to is that there are foreign interests, most of them Chinese, that have access not only to our government, but to corporate interests or contracted corporate interests. And specifically that being said, if you look at the way that race-based laws have been applied in this country, you'll see that, for instance, Chinese foreign interests are exempt from certain practices and tax exempt statuses and things like that. So one wonders, okay, but how far does it really go? And just to even brush on the fact that there might be something deeper to the land expropriation issue, like, say, for instance, mining rights, and considering that Cyril Ramaphosa has ties to, for instance, the Oppenheimers, ties to mining interests.
Anglo Gold.
Exactly. So one wonders, but who's actually benefiting? And then you've got Theresa May pitching up not too long ago and
exactly
showing South Africans out to Soki. Then you start wondering, but okay, where's this going? And we throwing a few ideas out there that are seemingly connected, but there's sufficient grounds for this. What have you uncovered, at least where that's concerned, where the mining aspects are concerned, and where hidden interests might be present when it comes to the expropriation issue?
Well, realistically, I haven't uncovered anything that you haven't, because, as I said, it's all conspiratorial at this point. But when we talk about foreign interests, we know for a fact that our government very recently has been, shall we say, exploited by foreign interests. We know that for a fact. The Gupta leaks. It might not have been China, but they were still foreigners controlling our government from the shadows. So I think it's completely within the realm of possibility to think that some foreign nation, either the UK, and I put the UK in quotation marks because it's various interest groups within the UK, either them or the Chinese busy orchestrating our government. Because realistically, I think many of these people are puppets. They only care. They only care about their own wealth. They don't care about the well-being of the country. They don't care about the well-being of their people. Obviously, the race thing, I think we should obviously hammer upon that, because it's undeniable that there is a racial aspect to this land expropriation. But I think to those in charge, I think this is just a useful excuse for them to enact these racial discriminatory policies. They looked for this opportunity, and China or the Oppenheimers presented it to them, and they just grabbed it by the balls, I guess. And now here we are. But if we were to talk about China's, what China does, a very interesting thing, I went to Gaborone recently, the capital city of Botswana, and it's quite unimpressive as a capital city would go. It looks like one of our small towns, basically. But in the middle of the town is a massive skyscraper. You think to yourself, what is this skyscraper? And next to the skyscraper is this extensive railway line. And you think to yourself, well, why is there this giant skyscraper and this railway line in this unimpressive city? You drive closer and then you see the sign at the skyscraper. It's a commercial bank of China. And then you realize, oh, the Chinese built the railway. And then you realize as well, China colonized Africa and we didn't realize. It's a crazy thing. It's a crazy thing because, like you said, people don't talk about this. It's like, because it's not white, it's okay. When in reality, I think from what I've seen in the past and whatnot, and what I know of Chinese ethics, they're going to treat the inhabitants of Africa far worse than any European colonial power ever did. It's crazy to think.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've been to just look at Namibia. It's a country that I grew up in Windhoek as well. You see the presidential house it's massive. It is gold plated, and it was also a gift from the Chinese. And what they do is they buy up mines, buy up mineral rights, and they send in their ex-prisoners to get a few Namibian passport, and then they work in the mines, so it doesn't even help the employment. And then slowly, I mean, they're such a massive, massive country, there's not enough space for them. So they will colonize somewhere, and it's also, I saw pictures now a few days ago about some missiles, or it looks like they're building a little military camp somewhere in Zimbabwe, which I wouldn't be surprised about. While the two of you are trying out for a place on InfoWars with all your conspiracies, we mostly, I think, the idea is obviously that, whatever the government, whether for whatever reason they're doing it as immoral as it gets, and we should still stand against it. And, I obviously agree with a lot of these things. And, it's always impossible to know. It's always this weird idea when people ask, like, how do we know if the government is, trying to do it for our best, or they're trying to help? One thing is, if any of you have ever had a wife or girlfriend, it is we still have not been able to read minds. And if after being with someone for 5 to 10 years and you still don't know what they want for their birthday, and try a government to know what to do with half your money to improve your life, it's ludicrous, impossible, and completely irrational. So the idea that a government at all knows what I want, and two, what the market needs is ludicrous. And we also see it with the surveys that have been done about what people want and what black people want. And definitely it's not land. We know that. It's like only 1% say that land reform is an issue. So, the evidence is there, and just on philosophical grounds, the government can never really know what you want. Impossible, because so far people can't read minds. So, for whatever reason they do it, we should attack it as much as we can. And maybe from there on, we can now go into maybe more, what practical ideas do you have that everyone out there, whether they are multimillionaire or if they're stuck in South Africa, they can't get out and they have to fight the good fight, what are practical things people can do, what white South Africans could do right now?
Well, I think the primary thing that we as Afrikaners especially, we should seek to fund programs like the Urania Project. And why I say programs like the Urania Project is, I know Urania doesn't necessarily appeal to all Afrikaners. I've heard from numerous people, they sort of get lost in the minutiae, but the minutiae is what makes or breaks it for them. For example, the fact that one of the entry requirements to Urania is the fact that you're a Calvinist Protestant. I've heard many people disagree with that, and my response to that is, fine, create your own Urania. That's a good thing, in my opinion. So my advice to anyone who is interested in a better future for our people, consider creating your own company. That's another thing. Either fund projects like Urania, create your own projects like Urania, or create your own company to generate wealth and generate, shall we say, political clout. Because if we don't have people in positions of economic power, we can forget about ever having self-determination, if you know what I mean. This is also, I see it a lot in the alt-right circles in the US. Very often they talk about ethno-states and whatnot. Many times the question comes up, how do you achieve said ethno-state? And I think the best way to achieve that, like I said, is through economic pressure. Have some of our people in positions of power, both economically and legally, i.e. get our people in the legal profession, get them in banks, insurance companies, basically streams of finance. Have our people control finance, have our people control the legal system, the judiciary, and then you have power. I mean, many groups, there are many groups who have followed this strategy to much success. If you can catch that dog whistle.
Certain ethno-religious individuals of a certain ethno-religious persuasion.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. Many people on our side of the aisle will blindly criticize and demonize these individuals of this certain ethno-religious group. And I'm not saying that they're above criticism. Don't get me wrong. They aren't perfect. But if we want to secure power, that's the way we should do it. We should work our way up, and then, but do it slowly and surely. I mean, realistically, we probably don't have the time, us as Afrikaners, but conceptually to those who might be listening abroad, that's the way you're going to achieve self-determination.
That's exactly a very good point. And unfortunately, as it stands, us Afrikaners, especially, whites in South Africa, are far too atomized. And that specifically is a huge problem, because there's nothing that really binds us. There are so many denominations of Christianity in South Africa. I mean, in most towns and cities, you've got church of a certain denomination almost on every corner. So you've got there's diversity of choice where it goes, and it's great. I mean, it's community, it's wonderful. But when it comes to the bigger picture, we don't immediately practice nepotism, for instance. I mean, we inherently go for fairness and for what could possibly
meritocracy.
It has to do with you pull yourself by your own bootstraps, and no one else thinks like that. It's only us. And unfortunately, that's our downfall. And especially as Afrikaners, as whites in South Africa, we need to be able to do that, at least on quite a few levels. Like you say, I mean, those are damn good ideas, is to get into those institutions and you help your own. Charity starts at home, as they say. And I think on a smaller scale and a larger scale, that's a very good way to reestablish community.
Yeah, but that's why I respect AfriForum so much. I didn't realize until fairly recently precisely the scope of their activities. I think what they're doing is great, because they're basically what I just suggested. They're pretty much enacting that, and that's wonderful. I mean, they have a very competent legal team who, by and large, look after our interests. They pursue cases which would benefit us, our people. They have affiliations to Verseker, the insurance company. It's wonderful. I think that's the way to go. Corporate and economic pressure. I think especially to people like those in power here, economic pressure is much more scary than, we have guns, because guns can be taken. They can roll up with a tank. You know what I mean? They can always outgun us. But if we control the money, they can't really outgun us, because we can basically buy them out. But as I wanted to, I also just wanted to say, in terms of collectivizing, I understand what you mean, and I agree with you by and large when you said that the biggest problem we as Afrikaners face is the fact that we are so divided in terms of religion, in terms of many different things. The way for us to collectivize is not necessarily to say, it's not necessarily to count our similarities. I think it's better to say, okay, what are we not? We are not black. We are not communists. And that's already a start. That's a way of collectivizing already. But that's just my take.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I had that thought, and you articulated it well. And it's the same. It's one of the few problems I have with the Rania is the fact they do have that specific idea that you have to be of a specific Christian denomination to fit in, wherein if you started with a bigger sort of blanket variable being white, a lot more people would have, I think, gone there already. And one of the worrisome things I have, because I kind of tried and test a crowd or test a group, and you're at a braai or you're at a or somewhere, and you just throw something in by the Rani to see what are people's reactions. And it disappoints me a lot to say that people's reactions are still incredibly negative, and that I actually get attacked when I say, we made a documentary, and I think it's great. It's wonderful. So yes, it does need people with a lot of money to take the first bold steps and say, cool, we've bought 5-6 farms. Here we go. This is our modus operandi. This is what we're doing. Yeah. Anyone's welcome to join. The issue with the economic thing is, which I obviously agree with you, but it's always the issue, is that there is legal issues against you only trading with you creating an only white business. It is very difficult. We've seen some guys who don't allow black people to sleep at his bed and breakfast, and look what happened to him. So it is a very difficult thing, and I agree with you. AfriForum is right at that threshold of staying within legal bounds. But the bottom line is they're going to change the constitution till you're so backed in a corner where it's impossible. Let's just say that to win this war, it's impossible. Whether you do it economic means, whether you can do it political means, we're not going to win if we stay within legal and political realm, and that's the sad reality.
I agree with you somewhat. When you say we won't win if we stay within legal means, I think we will. It's just it has to be very carefully, our plans have to be very carefully put forth. Because like you said, it's illegal to refuse service based on race. But the trick is, much like what AfriForum's Ventures does, you don't necessarily have to refuse service if those people don't seek service, if that makes sense. The trick is branding. I think that's key that people tend to forget. Find a niche market, appeal only to that market, but be explicit that it's designed for that market. For example, with Verseker, the name alone, it's in Afrikaans. I can't see how, I wouldn't necessarily imagine a black guy would necessarily use Verseker, you know what I mean? So I think that's what we have to do with all projects like Urania as well, branding. You don't obviously understand why Urania does that, and I agree. There should be a point where you just admit what you're doing, where you should just say, this is our new homeland, this is a Afrikaner Volksstaat. But until you reach that point where enough people are involved, where you can explicitly say what you're doing, you have to play it coy. You have to say, no, this is just an organization of like-minded individuals. This is just a company. Everyone who lives here are workers of the same company. This is just a corporate town. You know what I mean? Until you build that, the clout, social capital, as you said, until you build that social capital, then you have to play it very, very carefully.
No, sure. No, I hear you. And again, I think it's good that we have, we've got some differences in our opinion. And, I truly think they have been allowed to put, about 140 different race laws into constitution and regulations. So to think that, you're going to win within legal bounds, I think, might be a little bit naive, but yeah, sure. I think you stay within legal bounds as long as you can. And I mean, I get what you're saying. It is a branding thing. And, you could say the same for Muslims. They brand very well. If you go to some places in the Cape Flats, what they do is they put up a mosque and they blare this drone-like music 5 times a day. And of course, I'm not going to stay there. I'm going to leave. So it's a nice way to let everyone else get out of there and make sure their people come there. And maybe we should put up a tower and put on Kurt Darren's Scoffle number 9 and blare it out for a very long time. Maybe then people will arrive.
Yeah, that's an idea. Play Colfoot Socky in the townships until they leave. That's a great idea, actually. No, but really, when we talk about legal means, though, I think I'm always, like I said, I'm a bit hesitant to say explicitly that we should break the law. I think a better solution would be, like we mentioned earlier, crypto, 3D printing of your own weapons, that kind of thing, where you're not,
which are all illegal, right?
No, I mean, Bitcoins aren't illegal, not yet anyway. I'm not sure if we have a law regarding 3D printed guns, though. I'm not sure about that.
No, it's true. No, any gun, any gun is illegal. You still have to register certain parts of it. So you can't just make one that. Yeah. So there is registration issues, and it is illegal to make your own currency, and obviously using a currency which cannot be traced and taxed is obviously also illegal. So,
fair enough. Let me put it this way: when we talk about breaking the law, it's more of a gray area than it's explicitly going out and breaking the law, in my opinion. So I do agree with you. Actually, now that we've clarified that, I do agree. Some bending of the law might be necessary. I'm not advocating that. Don't quote me on that.
Very well said. Very well.
Yeah.
Especially want to get your opinion regarding the current change in global attention on South Africa. Now, one of the reasons why we contacted you was we came across an interview you had done on the Ralph Retort's YouTube channel on their Killstream. And you spoke about South Africa very eloquently. You answered many questions that the listeners had regarding South Africa. Many topics came up, and we feel that you answered them well, and you represented the issues very succinctly and quite well. Now, one of the aspects that stood out was crime. Yes, that's a huge thing here in South Africa. Any South African listener will know exactly what we mean when we say how bad the crime is here. And the one thing that came out is desensitization. Give us perhaps a bit of background regarding us as Afrikaners or us as white South Africans, how easily we've adapted to the situation, and what can we do to break free from that complacency?
We as Afrikaners, we as white people in South Africa, let's put the broad umbrella term. We have become extremely desensitized to crime, to violence. It's become a way of life, basically. The reason why, I think, is because our media, we constantly hear these horror stories. Constantly. Just recently, I heard a story in the Cape Flats where a man molested and murdered a 3-month-old baby, all because he was angry with his girlfriend. You hear these stories, and after a while, they start losing impact. They just become white noise, so to speak. And I think the way we should counteract that is if we want to talk, as you said, philosophically, a racial awakening, I suppose, has to take place. We have to realize that we are separate from the rest of the country. We are a people of our own volition. And when things happen to us and our people, we have to treat it with a higher regard than if things happen to other people. It sounds bad. It sounds unpalatable, I suppose, but that's just the fact of the matter. That's how you get success. When you prioritize your in-group, when your in-group preference is higher than your out-group preference, then you will achieve success. And the reason why it sounds unpalatable, we're conditioned to not think that way. We've been conditioned to think that we live in an egalitarian rainbow nation. Everyone is equal. Everyone is same. Everyone is the same. That's why you get, for example, the DA, whenever the topic of farm murders comes up, they respond with, "Oh, but all murders are bad." Sure, no one's disagreeing that all murders are bad. But let's tackle our issues. Let's tackle farm murders. Let's tackle the squatter camp in Bloemfontein. You know, just because these issues aren't ubiquitous, just because these issues only affect us, doesn't mean we're not going to prioritize them. In fact, I think that's precisely what we have to do, because we can't rely on the government to protect us. They clearly hate us, and any facet of the government by that metric is not our ally, and we should enact a fair amount of cynicism when regarding the government and when regarding what we're being told by the media. We should only look out for ourselves, I suppose. Look out for us, our own people. On the topic of global awareness, I think the Trump tweet has done more than any of us could ever imagine. I think it's shifted the Overton window in many countries significantly, I think. Whereas South Africa was not even a talking point until a few months ago. South Africa wasn't a talking point. Now it's on everyone's lips. Now everyone has an opinion on it. Whether it's a good opinion or a bad opinion, everyone has an opinion. And I think that's progress. That's a start.
No, we couldn't agree more. And you've said it very well. I mean, the Overton window has shifted significantly. And the attention on just South Africans in the issues that we have here. I mean, what was interesting is seeing the backlash, for instance. There were reporters of, say, for instance, the Huffington Post in New York, who had very much to say that, oh, but this is a conspiracy in South Africa. And we actually tweeted at them and said, but we'll host you. Come and check what it's like in South Africa. But I mean, obviously there would be no response to that. But at the same time, like you say, everyone has something to say about it. And that's exactly the point. The attention has increased.
Yeah, absolutely. I made a video about it was just a candid little, humorous video where I looked at some of the replies to the Trump tweet, and you'd be surprised some of the people commenting. Groups like the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, they had something to say. Obviously not something positive, not something positive to our cause, but they still had something to say. And the fact of the matter is, the more people you have talking about this issue, even if they aren't saying what you want them to say, the more people you have talking about this, the more the consciousness about our strife will grow. And I think likewise to the people locally. I think the Trump tweet may have red-pilled some people here. I mean, that might be a bit idealistic and hopeful, but I think it's possible. I think it's certainly possible. After the Trump tweet, of course, the government announced that they would be rewriting the proposed EWC bill, if I'm not mistaken. So there was some significant that tweet. It's crazy to think a single tweet.
Yeah, it's insane. A single tweet. Well, we mentioned, it's one wonders that, any attention that you bring on Twitter and things like that, does it really make a difference? And this is actually a good example of something making a huge difference. As we wind down, where do you see South Africa headed, say, in the next 5 to 10 years? Well, for that matter, in the next year, considering how quickly the situation can change in a matter of a few minutes and, say, for instance, overnight, the tweet in mind, obviously.
Yeah, of course. Look, the thing is, I'll be completely honest, I have no idea in what direction we're headed, because there's so many things that could happen. I've heard rumors, again, tinfoil hat on, I've heard rumors that the US government and the UN have started collecting around our borders in case shit hits the fan, in case a civil war breaks out. They'll come in and they'll, stabilize the region, quote unquote. So that's a possibility. Another possibility is that the government will just say, hey, we fooled you all. No EWC for you. And we'll carry on as if nothing ever happened. That's a possibility. Another possibility is that they'll go through with the plans and a civil war will break out. I think it's too soon to tell, because like you said, so many things happen so very quickly. At the start of the year, I wouldn't imagine I'd be here talking to you about this issue. Things really happen quickly. And especially now with so much momentum from both sides, from the anti-expropriation side and from the pro-expropriation side, it's really building up speed and momentum. So what's going to happen is anyone's guess. What do you think is going to happen, Sina and Woodendahl? What do you guys think?
My sort of short summary is, I think people's idea that it's going to be, a Rwandan type genocide, I obviously don't think that's realistic. That's not going to happen. Crime might increase, dysfunction might increase, municipalities will keep on failing. What you see every day as you're on Twitter is you see another shop being looted, more farmers being occupied. And I think that will increase. And that has, basically two or three effects. One is everyone's getting out of the country. Most friends that I know have left. The other half is planning. So, you can't have a civil war with 14 people. So, at some point, everyone's going to leave. Yeah. And that is going to just accelerate. And as you accelerate, the people that stay, they will, condense. They will move maybe to Cape Town, where it's probably the safest. And you'll kind of have a last sort of fort in a way. But the country will, in a sense, if you look at Zimbabwe, there's nothing more to steal. There's nothing more to fight. Everyone is there's no money in the government. The hospitals fail. So, in a sense, I don't really see that then as a complete civil war, black on white. I just see it as becoming more dysfunctional overall for everybody. Because let's be real, the greatest disaster is for black people because they're in the majority. It's 40 odd million of them that are just going to go into deeper poverty. But I see most people getting out and the rest consolidating, and then a slow decline to a point where it's just another third world country, which will be forgotten in a sense. So my idea is next year will obviously be crazy. I think it's crazy. It's elections. Things will heat up. And then after that, maybe a bit of a lull. And then again, that slow decline. But again, like as I spoke to Erudite before, it's you're seeing around the world a lot of sort of currency problems. You see it in Turkey, you see it in Argentina. Obviously, Venezuela has crashed already a long time ago. With the debt crisis you have in the world, we are more and more prone to a sudden sort of currency crisis, which will accelerate things. So it is. If the world situation stays as it is, I think it's a slow decline. If you have sudden drops in markets and suddenly the rand loses half its value, well, everything happens pretty quickly, right? I give it a few years, and personally, I have a backup plan to get out, but I will fight until I can. But you have to get out if you can. Sure.
Let me just say, I completely agree with you 100%. That's very succinctly put, and you took the words right out of my mouth once again. Like I said, you touched upon a point that's very important. I think as part of, you guys asked me, what should we do as white South Africans? I think we should still, while we're here, we should try and change the country in some way. We should try and create an autonomous region for ourselves. But at the same time, we have to be realistic and we have to have a backup plan. We have to have an evacuation plan to try and get out if shit really hits the fan. But back on the topic of a civil war, I think another factor of a quote unquote civil war that people don't necessarily realize is it's not as simple as just blacks versus whites. Because of course, within Black South Africa, there's so much infighting. The Zulus hate the Xhosas, the Pedis hate the Sutus, that kind of thing. Obviously, it's not just black and white in the country. You have blacks, then you have coloreds, then you have whites. So a civil war would realistically, I don't think it would necessarily be just on racial grounds. Race would play a factor, don't get me wrong, but I think it would be more ideological in nature. But that's just my take. I might be completely wrong.
That's a few excellent points, I think. And maybe we should leave the discussion at that point for now. What I'd like you to do is perhaps please tell the audience where they can get more of your work, maybe reach out to you, where they can see more of what you are doing. You've mentioned a YouTube channel. Sure. Where else can they?
Sure. For now, the YouTube channel, it's SGL. You might struggle to find that. As I said, I'm just starting out, so my search engine optimization isn't what it should be. So just search Trump tweet SGL and you should find me. And then I have a Twitter account as well. If you want to chat to me there, it's rightwingso @rightwingso. But yeah, I'm working on another video where I'm going to be talking about a theory I have regarding communism, why communism is so popular amongst middle-class individuals who went to university and that kind of thing.
We look forward to watching that, and it'll definitely be interesting, no doubt, and we definitely look forward to seeing that. Thanks again for coming on the show, for chatting with us. We look forward to more. You've always got an open invitation on this podcast, so please, we'd love to have you on again.
Oh, thank you very much. It was wonderful talking to you guys, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time to listen to another Boer Republic podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And if this message resonates with you, please spread it as far as you can. Your support is appreciated. We also welcome cryptocurrency donations, and any support we receive in that regard goes to improving our content, as well as enabling us to do more documentary and investigation-style videos. The addresses can be found in the description below. Any feedback is encouraged, and we look forward to engaging with you on our various social media platforms. You can find us on a variety of social platforms, and you can find those links below. Included is our email address, which you can use to contact us. We update as regularly as we can, so please follow and reach out to us. Until next time, stay safe, wherever you may find yourself.